The evening started quietly with soft lights casting a warm glow over the room. It was a place people came to relax after long days, to escape the noise outside, and to enjoy music that comforted the soul. Most people were settled in their seats, chatting softly or sipping on their drinks. The hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of glasses, creating a familiar, soothing rhythm. She walked through the doorway carrying nothing but herself, wearing clothes that were simple and practical, blending into the background. No one noticed her at first, and that was fine with her. She liked it that way, the quiet way. The way that let her observe without being observed. She had been coming here for some time, mostly for work, and sometimes just to sit quietly and think. The place was known for its music, though not for grand performances. Pianists played occasionally, but there was no expectation of greatness, no crowd that demanded brilliance. Tonight was like any other evening, ordinary, predictable. She carried her notebook in one hand, the pages filled with ideas, sketches, and reminders that made life feel organized in a world that often wasn't. Sitting at a corner table, she let her eyes wander across the room. People smiled at friends, some stared at their phones, and others simply enjoyed the quiet company of strangers. Then came the request. Small and polite. It was directed at the piano in the corner, an old upright that had seen better days. The request was not loud or dramatic, just a simple, almost casual question. Could someone play something? Anything? The words hung lightly in the air, almost as if they might disappear if not spoken again. The room shifted subtly, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She noticed it, though, the way the attention moved slightly toward the piano. She hadn't expected it. Didn't imagine herself responding, but somehow, she felt a tug at her curiosity. She watched as the person making the request gave a small, encouraging smile to the pianist who had been tending the instrument for years. But the usual pianist hesitated, glanced at the small crowd, and shook their head. It was an unusual night, and perhaps they were tired, perhaps unsure, perhaps simply not in the mood. The request seemed to linger, unanswered, and for reasons she could not explain, she found herself rising from her seat. Her heart beat faster, a mix of fear and excitement she could not name. She walked toward the piano slowly, each step measured, as if the floor itself might challenge her. She did not know why she was doing it. Perhaps it was the pull of the music, the chance to connect with the room. Or perhaps it was simply the need to do something bold, something that belonged entirely to her. The room noticed her movement, though subtly. Some heads turned, curiosity sparking in eyes that had been resting, content, unaware. Whispers followed her quietly, like leaves rustling in a gentle wind. They did not know her, could not have known what she might do. She approached the piano, a sense of calm settling over her even as nervousness fluttered in her chest. She laid her hands on the keys, felt the familiar texture beneath her fingers, and closed her eyes for a moment. This was not a performance for anyone else. This was her space, her choice, and in that moment, everything else fell away. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she thought about the many times she had played in private, in the stillness of her room or in empty halls where her music belonged only to herself. Those moments had been hers alone, and yet she knew, somehow, that tonight was different. The room held its breath, though no one spoke. The anticipation was quiet, but real. It was the kind of silence that carries weight, that makes a simple note feel monumental. She began with a soft touch, barely pressing the keys, letting the sound float like a gentle whisper. The music was not loud or showy, but it was honest. It spoke of all the things words could not, hopes, fears, and the quiet persistence of a soul that had never given up. The first notes were simple, almost hesitant, but they reached into the corners of the room. Touching ears and hearts alike, people stopped their conversations, their attention drawn without effort, without demand. It was not a song anyone recognized, yet it felt familiar, like a memory that had been waiting to resurface. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her, fingers moving with increasing confidence, each note a small story, a tiny piece of a larger tapestry she had carried inside her for years. The room felt different now, warmer somehow, as if the air itself had shifted to accommodate the music. Strangers glanced at one another, sharing glances of quiet wonder. Acknowledging that something extraordinary was unfolding, she had always been careful to stay in the background. Careful not to draw attention to herself. It had been easier that way. Life, after all, often demanded compromise, patience, and the quiet endurance of those who preferred to observe rather than be observed. But tonight, something had changed. The simple request, the polite question that had seemed so insignificant, had opened a door, and she had stepped through it without fully knowing what awaited her on the other side. Each chord she played was not just music, but a declaration, a subtle proclamation that her time, her talent, and her voice mattered even if no one had asked for it until now. The soft murmur of conversation faded almost completely as she played. The notes moved with a fluidity that seemed impossible, a rhythm that resonated with the hidden emotions of the room. People leaned forward in their seats, unconsciously drawn into the story she was telling without words. The music carried weight and lightness, sadness and hope intertwined. Every keystroke was a choice, and the audience felt it deeply. They could not have understood the hours of practice, the silent battles, the moments of doubt that had brought her to this point, but they could feel the truth behind each note. A few people reached for their drinks, then paused, realizing they no longer needed them. The piano became more than an instrument. It was a bridge, a way to connect hearts in a place that had seemed ordinary only moments ago. She did not notice the eyes on her, the whispers that had grown into quiet astonishment. She only noticed the music, the way it seemed to flow naturally from her fingers, as if it had been waiting all along. There was no plan, no intention to impress. She simply let herself be, trusting the music to carry her, and unknowingly, the entire room along with her. The room shifted again, imperceptibly, as if recognizing the presence of something rare. Strangers who had arrived for casual evenings found themselves holding their breath, leaning in, listening not just with their ears but with their hearts. Each note was a thread, weaving people together in a shared experience they had not expected and could not forget. It was remarkable because it had started as something ordinary, simple requests that might have gone unnoticed if she had chosen to ignore it, but she had not. And in that choice lay the beginning of a story that would be remembered long after the night ended. Time seemed to stretch and contract around her as she played. Minutes felt like seconds, yet the weight of the music made them feel eternal. She noticed the small details, the flicker of candlelight on faces, the soft expressions of awe, the way hands rested lightly on tables as if afraid to disturb the moment. She felt a sense of responsibility, not for applause or recognition, but for the honesty of her music. Every hesitation, every crescendo, every pause was part of a dialogue between her and the room. It was fragile and powerful at the same time. A paradox she embraced fully. As the final chord lingered, she allowed herself to breathe, opening her eyes slowly. The room remained still for a heartbeat, caught in the aftermath of what had just occurred. Then quietly at first, then with growing certainty, the people began to react. Applause erupted, tentative at first, then strong and heartfelt. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others smiled broadly, unable to hide their astonishment. But more than the applause, it was the feeling in the room that mattered. She had created something that went beyond performance. She had made a connection, simple yet profound, born of courage and a willingness to answer a request that might have seemed small to anyone else. She rose from the piano, slightly trembling, feeling the warmth of the moment settle around her. It was overwhelming, yet it was not about vanity or pride. It was about understanding, finally, that her music had value not because of recognition but because of its ability to touch others. The ordinary evening had transformed into something extraordinary, all because she had chosen to act, to let herself be seen in a way she rarely allowed. People approached her with smiles, congratulations, and quiet awe, but she remained humble, letting the experience sink in quietly, understanding that the story had only just begun. As she returned to her seat, still a little breathless, she realized that the world could be changed in small, unexpected ways. One simple request had been enough to reveal a hidden depth of talent, to create a moment that would linger in the memory of everyone present. She understood that her life, which had felt ordinary and unnoticed, could contain extraordinary moments if she simply allowed herself to step forward. That evening, in that room filled with strangers, she had discovered something new about herself, and in doing so, she had given others a gift they would carry far beyond that night. It was a quiet, powerful lesson in courage, in presence, and in the unexpected magic that life could offer when one chose to act, even in the simplest ways. After the music had ended, the room slowly returned to life. Conversations began again, softer this time, as if everyone was still holding on to the moment, reluctant to let it go. She remained seated for a while, hands folded quietly in her lap, letting the warmth of the applause settle in her chest. She did not seek attention, but she could feel eyes lingering, curious, and appreciative. Some people whispered to each other, sharing their disbelief. Others simply watched, captivated by the simplicity and beauty of what had just occurred. She was aware of the attention, but it did not overwhelm her. Instead, it reminded her of something she had forgotten: the power of stepping forward, of taking a chance, even when the outcome was uncertain. She had always been cautious, careful not to expose too much of herself to the world. Life had taught her the value of patience, the importance of blending in, and the security of staying quiet. But tonight had been different. A simple request, almost casual, had nudged her into action. And in doing so, she had discovered a new side of herself, one that was willing to embrace vulnerability and transform it into strength. The thought made her smile softly, a mixture of relief and excitement. She realized that the hesitation she had felt before approaching the piano had been necessary, a moment that made the eventual courage feel real and earned. As she looked around the room, she noticed how subtly people were still reacting. Some faces were flushed with emotion, eyes glistening from the unspoken connection they had experienced through her music. Others leaned closer to friends, sharing quiet comments about the depth and honesty of the performance. The effect of her playing was not loud or dramatic, but profound. The simplicity of the notes, the authenticity of the expression, had touched something hidden in everyone present. She did not know the names of the people she had affected, and that did not matter. The beauty of it lay in the fact that a shared moment could exist without familiarity or pretense. She lingered near the piano for a while, tracing her fingers over the keys again, feeling the textures beneath them. Each key held a memory, a possibility, a tiny story of past practice, private moments, and quiet dedication. She thought about all the hours she had spent alone, perfecting her skills, wrestling with mistakes, learning patience. Those hours had often felt tedious, lonely, and even pointless at times. Yet tonight, in this unexpected moment, they had been transformed into something meaningful. She realized that all the effort, the discipline, and the silent perseverance had prepared her for this single instance of connection. It was a quiet revelation, one that made her chest tighten with gratitude and awe. The room gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the energy lingered like a gentle echo. Conversations resumed, but there was an undercurrent of awareness that something unique had happened. People were smiling at each other, nodding in silent agreement, acknowledging the subtle magic that had unfolded. Even the usual background noises, the clinking of glasses, the soft hum of voices felt infused with a new warmth, as if the music had not only touched hearts, but had shifted the entire atmosphere. She observed it all quietly, her own presence still modest, yet her mind buzzing with the realization of what had occurred. Her thoughts wandered to the idea of courage. She had not considered herself brave in the past. Life often demanded that she stay in the shadows, and she had complied without complaint. But courage was not always about grand gestures or heroic feats. Sometimes it was about listening to an inner voice, responding to a gentle nudge, and taking a small step forward. Her simple action, answering a quiet request, had become an act of courage that affected everyone in the room. The realization filled her with a quiet sense of pride, not the kind that sought recognition, but the kind that comes from knowing she had faced herself and stepped beyond the familiar. As she slowly made her way back to her table, She noticed the pianist, who had been expected to play tonight, observing her with a mix of curiosity and respect. The usual performer had not known what to do when the request was made. But now, seeing the impact of her music, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. The moment had been hers, unique and unrepeatable. And even the experienced pianist seemed to recognize that something rare had occurred. It was not a rivalry, nor was it boastfulness. It was simply a shared appreciation of talent and courage. In that silent understanding, she felt a sense of belonging she had never anticipated. Sitting back at her table, she allowed herself to reflect on the way music had always been a companion in her life. It had been a refuge, a confidant, a place where she could express emotions she could not put into words. Yet she had never fully understood the power it held to reach others until this evening. The connection she felt with the room, with strangers she would likely never meet again, was a revelation. It was a reminder that art, even in its simplest form, could transcend boundaries, create empathy, and bring people together in unexpected ways. She had always known it intellectually, but tonight she had felt it deeply. In the core of her being, the room gradually began to empty as the evening wore on. But a quiet buzz remained, the kind that leaves an imprint long after people depart. She watched as groups of friends rose to leave, glancing back at the piano with fondness, perhaps carrying memories of the music with them into the night. The experience was fleeting, yet it had left a lasting mark, not only on the listeners but on her as well. She understood now that moments like these could define a life in subtle ways, shaping confidence, purpose, and self-belief. It was not about fame or recognition, but about embracing opportunities and responding with authenticity. She thought about the small request that had started it all. A simple question, almost casual, had opened a door she had not known existed. It made her realize how life often works in mysterious ways. Opportunities might come disguised as ordinary moments, waiting for someone brave enough to take them seriously. The key was willingness, the willingness to step forward, to act, to embrace vulnerability. She had done so, and in return, she had received something far greater than applause or recognition. She had discovered a new depth of confidence in the joy of sharing her gift in a way that genuinely touched others. As she packed her notebook and belongings, preparing to leave, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The evening had been ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in experience. She had stepped out of the shadows, faced her doubts, and allowed her talent to shine in a way that was honest and unassuming. She understood that life was full of such moments, small and often overlooked, that could hold profound significance if approached with courage and openness. It was a lesson she would carry forward, a reminder that greatness often starts with a simple, unassuming step, walking out into the cool night air. She reflected on the way the evening had unfolded. The streetlights cast a gentle glow, and the quiet hum of the city seemed different somehow, infused with the energy of possibility. She felt lighter, freer, more alive than she had in months. The simple request that had begun the night had transformed into an experience that would linger in her memory forever. It was a reminder that life could surprise, uplift, and connect people in ways that were subtle, yet powerful. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would never again underestimate the impact of taking a chance. No matter how small or ordinary it might seem, the next evening arrived with the same gentle calm as the night before. She found herself returning to the same room, drawn not by expectation but by curiosity. Something inside her wanted to see if the magic of the previous night could exist again, not for anyone else but for herself. The piano sat quietly in its corner, its surface reflecting the soft light like a calm mirror. She approached it slowly, fingers brushing over the keys as if greeting an old friend. The memory of the last performance was vivid, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness rise in her chest. She had not expected the effect her music had had on the audience, yet she felt ready to explore the depth of her own expression further as she sat down. The room gradually filled with the usual patrons. Some recognized her from the night before, their eyes lighting up with curiosity and anticipation. Others noticed her for the first time, unaware of what was about to unfold. She allowed herself to pause for a moment, listening to the gentle hum of the room. The subtle murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses. Each sound reminded her of the ordinary world outside the piano's reach. And yet, she was about to create something extraordinary within it. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she took a deep breath. The music she began was soft and tentative at first, delicate as a feather brushing the surface of water. She remembered the hesitation she had felt before her first performance, and this time she welcomed it. Hesitation was a sign of awareness, a reminder that every note mattered. She let the sound grow gradually, weaving a tapestry of soft chords and quiet harmonies that filled the room without overwhelming it. Listeners began to notice the subtle change in atmosphere, the way the music seemed to move through them rather than merely around them. As she played, she felt a strange sense of freedom. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to her inner world, a medium through which she could share thoughts and emotions she had never voiced. Each note carried fragments of her experiences, moments of doubt, joy, and quiet resilience. She remembered the long nights spent practicing alone, the time she had questioned her talent, and the gentle persistence that had led her to keep playing despite uncertainty. Now each of those experiences resonated through the room, touching hearts she could not see but could feel. The patrons listened quietly, some leaning forward as if drawn closer by invisible threads. There were no words, yet a conversation unfolded between the music and the listeners, a dialogue that transcended language. She noticed a few individuals closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others exchanged silent glances of shared understanding. The room itself seemed to breathe with the rhythm of her playing, alive in a way it never had before. She felt the responsibility of the moment but did not fear it. Rather, she embraced it with a calm determination. Her music began to explore deeper emotions, building in intensity while remaining graceful. The tempo shifted subtly, guiding the audience through a journey that was both intimate and expansive. She felt herself becoming part of the piano, and the piano becoming part of her, a seamless connection that allowed the music to flow effortlessly. The notes were not just sounds. They were stories, whispers of life, memories of pain and triumph that belonged to no one person, yet touched everyone present. She realized that her audience was not separate from her. They were participants in the experience, sharing in the creation of something beautiful and fleeting. Time seemed to bend around her as she continued to play. Moments stretched and compressed, each note taking on a weight and significance beyond the ordinary. She remembered the night before, the quiet awe she had felt in the room, and it encouraged her to explore further. She allowed herself to take risks, to experiment with dynamics and rhythm, trusting that the music itself would guide her. The audience responded instinctively, their faces reflecting astonishment, wonder, and a quiet sense of connection. No one interrupted, no one spoke, and yet the room vibrated with an unspoken unity. She began to incorporate subtle variations into familiar melodies, creating a blend of comfort and surprise. The familiar notes gave the audience a foothold, while the new interpretation sparked curiosity and engagement. She noticed small gestures, the gentle nods of heads, the tapping of fingers in time with the rhythm, the soft smiles that appeared unbidden. The music was alive, responding to the energy in the room, evolving with every interaction. She felt herself becoming more attuned to the audience's subtle cues, adjusting her expression in real time, creating a shared experience that was both personal and collective. As the performance progressed, she sensed a shift in her own confidence. The hesitation that had once accompanied her playing was replaced by a quiet assurance. She trusted her instincts, her knowledge of the instrument, and the emotional resonance she could create. Each chord, each pause, each flowing sequence of notes was intentional, yet it retained the spontaneity that made it authentic. The room had become a canvas, and her music was the brush, painting vivid landscapes of feeling and thought that transcended ordinary communication. She noticed a young couple sitting near the back, holding hands tightly, their eyes closed as if sharing a secret only they could understand. Across the room, an older man wiped a tear discreetly, moved by the emotional depth of the performance. A group of friends leaned closer to one another, murmuring softly, their attention entirely captured by the unfolding melody. She did not play for applause or recognition. She played for the honesty of the moment, for the invisible connection that had formed between her and every listener. It was a fragile, delicate magic that could not be forced, but only invited and nurtured. The music continued to evolve, shifting seamlessly between light, airy passages and deeper, more introspective segments. Each transition was a reflection of her inner state, a blend of reflection, anticipation, and quiet revelation. She felt a sense of liberation as she explored these dynamics. Realizing that the piano could articulate emotions, she could not speak aloud. The audience was not merely listening. They were experiencing alongside her, drawn into a journey of subtle intensity and shared humanity. The room had become a living entity, live with the resonance of shared emotion and unspoken understanding. A few moments of silence emerged between pieces, not intentional, but natural, allowing the audience to absorb and reflect. She noticed how those pauses deepened the impact of each note, creating a rhythm that felt organic rather than structured. Listeners leaned forward, exhaled softly, and allowed the space to settle, embracing the transient beauty of the experience. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, recognizing that the simplicity of her decision to play had created something far greater than she could have imagined. As she reached the final segment of her performance, the music became more expansive, embracing a full spectrum of emotion. It was a culmination of the journey, a blending of all the subtle themes she had explored: hesitation and courage, vulnerability and strength, reflection and anticipation. Each note was deliberate, resonant, and meaningful, carrying with it the weight of personal experience and the universality of human feeling. She could sense the collective attention of the room, the shared presence, and it filled her with a quiet sense of fulfillment and connection. The final note lingered in the air, soft yet powerful, and gradually faded into silence. The room remained still for a heartbeat, the impact of the music settling into every listener. Then, slowly the quiet was replaced by gentle murmurs, expressions of awe, and heartfelt acknowledgement. She felt a sense of completion, not in the applause, but in the awareness that something authentic and meaningful had occurred. The music had served its purpose. It had connected, moved, and inspired in a way that words could not capture. She remained seated for a few moments, absorbing the energy, feeling the presence of the room, and acknowledging the invisible threads that had woven them all together through sound and emotion. She understood that the performance had not been about recognition, nor about showing skill. It had been about honesty, courage, and the willingness to share a piece of herself with the world. The connection she felt with the listeners was subtle, but undeniable. A quiet bond formed through the language of music as she rose from the piano. She noticed the subtle gestures of appreciation from the audience. Gentle nods, soft smiles, eyes glistening with emotion. Some people lingered to offer quiet thanks, while others simply returned to their conversations, carrying the experience with them in a personal and private way. She smiled softly, acknowledging their presence without needing validation. The experience was complete, a shared moment of humanity that transcended performance and entered the realm of genuine connection. Walking back to her seat, she reflected on the power of small choices and unexpected opportunities. A simple request had led to a moment of profound expression, and it reminded her that life often presented possibilities in the most ordinary circumstances. Courage, honesty, and a willingness to step forward could create ripples far beyond immediate awareness, touching hearts and leaving lasting impressions. She understood now that music, like life itself, was not about perfection or recognition, but about presence, intention, and connection. The room had been transformed by a quiet magic, one that would linger in memory long after the evening ended. Sitting back at her table, she allowed herself a deep breath, feeling the calm satisfaction of the performance and the subtle energy that remained in the room. The experience had strengthened her confidence, deepened her understanding of herself, and reinforced the belief that authenticity was the most powerful form of expression. She realized that her life could be filled with such moments if she remained open to the unexpected, willing to act on intuition, and committed to sharing her gifts honestly. The piano had not only conveyed her emotions, but it also revealed the beauty of human the next night. The atmosphere felt different from the moment she stepped inside. There was a quiet anticipation in the air, a sense that something extraordinary might unfold again, even though she had no expectations. Patrons glanced in her direction, recalling the previous performances and their subtle impact. She did not notice everyone looking. She only felt the calm hum of the room, the soft lights, and the familiar presence of the piano waiting patiently in its corner. Tonight, she knew she would play not for anyone but herself and for the unspoken connections that music could create. As she approached the piano, her hands brushing against its smooth keys, she felt a strange mixture of comfort and nervousness. Music had always been her refuge, a place where she could express thoughts and emotions that were otherwise difficult to communicate. Each note she played had been a small window into her soul, and she realized that the audience, even without knowing her, had received a glimpse of her inner world. She had never intended to impress anyone, and yet her music had found its way into their hearts. That thought made her both humble and quietly proud. She sat down and let her fingers hover above the keys, taking a deep breath. The room grew silent, as if sensing the arrival of sound, waiting for the first note. She began with a simple melody, soft and flowing, letting it fill the corners of the room without forcing it. The notes moved gracefully, creating a subtle rhythm that gently pulled the audience into the moment. Conversations had faded. Only the music remained, weaving a thread between her and the listeners, connecting them in a quiet, profound way. Each note carried intention, emotion, and the echo of her experiences, transforming ordinary moments into something extraordinary. The patrons listened intently, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the unfolding story. She was aware of their presence, yet she did not let it dictate her performance. The music was hers, a dialogue between her and the piano, and the room was simply a witness. As the melody developed, she allowed herself to explore subtle variations, introducing delicate dynamics and soft harmonies that shifted gently with each measure. The music flowed like water, at times calm and serene, at times carrying an undercurrent of tension and release. It spoke of resilience, hope, and the quiet persistence of those who continue despite uncertainty. She noticed the expressions on the faces around her. A young man tilted his head slightly, absorbed in the sound. A woman near the back brushed a tear from her eye, touched by the sincerity of the notes. Even those who had not known her before were caught in the spell of the moment. It was not the complexity of the music or technical skill that held their attention, but the honesty of the expression, the raw emotion that transcended words. She felt a sense of connection with each listener, shared understanding that existed in the silence between the notes. As she continued, the music began to take on a narrative quality. Each chord and phrase told a story, flowing seamlessly from one idea to the next. She thought of her own life, the challenges and small victories, the moments of doubt and quiet determination. Those experiences shaped the music she created, infusing it with authenticity and depth. The audience responded instinctively, drawn into the journey without needing to understand every detail. The piano became a vessel, translating emotion into sound, bridging the gap between her inner world and the outer reality of the room. She explored contrasting emotions within the music, moving from gentle, reflective passages to more lively, expressive sections. The shifts were subtle, natural, and deeply human. The audience felt these transitions, their emotions guided by the ebb and flow of the melody. It was a conversation without words, a shared experience that required no explanation. The room itself seemed to transform, energized by the collective focus and attentive presence of those listening. She realized that music had the power to alter perception, to create a sense of unity, and to make strangers feel intimately connected through sound. Moments of quiet reflection emerged between the more expressive sections, allowing both her and the audience to absorb the impact of the preceding notes. In these pauses, she felt the weight of the room's attention. But it was not pressured, it was a gentle encouragement, a silent recognition of the bond formed through music. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, embracing the uncertainty of each note and trusting in the authenticity of her expression. It was in these moments that the music became truly alive. Evolving organically as she responded to the energy of the room, Her hands moved fluidly across the keys, each gesture purposeful yet natural. The melody wove a delicate tapestry of sound, balancing simplicity and depth. She noticed the subtle gestures of the audience, heads nodding, lips pressing together, eyes widening in surprise or softening in understanding. Their reactions were not distractions. They were part of the performance, silent affirmations that the music was reaching them in meaningful ways. She felt a sense of fulfillment that transcended applause or recognition, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her expression had touched lives. The music began to swell, building toward a gentle climax. She allowed the tempo to rise subtly, creating a sense of anticipation and release. The audience felt the momentum, drawn into the unfolding narrative without words. She reflected on the power of subtlety, realizing that true impact often lay in restraint, in the careful shaping of emotion rather than in overt dramatics. Her performance was a dance of nuance and intention, each note chosen with care to evoke feeling and thought. The room responded as one, the energy collective and quietly electric, a testament to the universal language of music. As the performance approached its conclusion, she returned to a theme introduced earlier, weaving it delicately through the final passages. The music resolved gently, leaving space for reflection and quiet appreciation. The last note lingered in the air, soft yet resonant, a delicate echo that seemed to settle over the room like a gentle sigh. Silence followed, filled with the weight of shared experience and unspoken acknowledgement. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a moment where time itself seemed to pause, allowing the impact of the music to sink deeply into the consciousness of everyone present. Gradually, the room came back to life, not with hurried movement, but with a calm, appreciative energy. Conversations resumed softly, infused with the memory of what had just transpired. She remained at the piano for a few moments, letting the resonance of the final chord fade completely, feeling the presence of the audience and the subtle warmth of connection. There was no need for immediate acknowledgement or applause. The shared understanding of the experience was enough. She understood that the true value of the performance lay not in external recognition, but in the authentic connection forged through music. She stood and returned to her seat, her mind reflecting on the journey of the evening. Each performance had been a step toward self-discovery, a way to explore and express emotions that had previously remained hidden. The act of playing had become a conversation, not with words, but with feeling, empathy, and shared humanity. She realized that the simplicity of the request that had begun this journey was a reminder that opportunities often arrive quietly, disguised in ordinary moments, waiting for someone willing to act with honesty and courage. As the night drew to a close, she observed the patrons leaving with subtle gestures of appreciation. Some paused to glance back at the piano, carrying the memory of the music with them. Others exchanged quiet words with friends, sharing their impressions and feelings. The room gradually emptied, yet the energy of the evening lingered, a soft imprint of emotion and connection that would remain with everyone who had been present. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had created a shared experience that transcended the boundaries of ordinary life. Walking toward the exit, she reflected on the lessons of the evening. Courage and authenticity had led her to moments of profound impact, and she recognized the importance of embracing opportunities, however small or unassuming. Music had revealed the power of vulnerability, the strength found in honest expression, and the subtle magic of human connection. She understood that life could offer moments of quiet transcendence, moments that transformed ordinary experiences into something memorable and meaningful. Her journey with the piano was not about recognition or fame. It was about truth, courage, and the shared beauty of being human. She stepped into the cool night air, feeling a sense of calm and renewal. The streetlights glowed softly, the city hum continued gently in the background, and she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of having touched lives through something as simple and profound as music. The room, the audience, and the piano had all played a role in creating an experience that would linger in memory, a reminder of the unexpected beauty that arises when one acts with courage and authenticity. In that quiet moment, she understood that the legacy of her music was not measured in applause. but in the lasting impact of shared emotion, connection, and the courage to be fully herself. The final evening arrived quietly, carrying with it a sense of anticipation she could feel but not name. The room felt familiar, yet different, as if it too sensed that something meaningful was about to unfold. She walked in slowly, taking in the warm glow of the lights and the soft murmur of voices. Patrons glanced at her with curiosity and recognition, remembering the previous performances that had left subtle imprints on their hearts. She smiled lightly, acknowledging them without seeking attention. Tonight was not about performance or applause. It was about presence, honesty, and the quiet power of connection. She approached the piano, feeling a mixture of calm and excitement. Her hands hovered over the keys, familiar and inviting, ready to convey emotions that words could not capture. She allowed herself a deep breath, listening to the gentle background sounds of the room, and then began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, and tentative, like whispers shared only with those willing to listen. She let the melody flow naturally, allowing it to grow organically without forcing it. Knowing that the beauty lay in honesty and subtlety rather than complexity or showmanship, as the music filled the room, she felt herself sinking into a state of quiet focus. Her fingers moved with fluidity, guided by instinct and emotion. Each note carried fragments of her experiences, moments of quiet struggle, and the resilience she had built over time. The audience, unaware of the intricacies of her personal journey, responded to the music in a deeply human way. Heads tilted, eyes closed, breaths held, and gentle nods acknowledged the power of what was unfolding. It was not a performance for recognition. It was an expression of truth, and that made it resonate far more profoundly. The music began to tell a story, subtle yet clear, moving from gentle introspection to quiet intensity. She explored dynamics with care, alternating between soft, reflective passages and more expressive, flowing segments. Each transition carried emotion, guiding the listeners through feelings of hope, longing, and quiet joy. She noticed how the audience responded without interruption, each person absorbed in their own connection to the music. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, the air charged with the invisible energy created by shared attention and emotion. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, embracing the uncertainty of each note. The piano became an extension of her thoughts and feelings, translating them into sound in a way that transcended words. She reflected on the lessons she had learned over the past performances. Courage comes in small steps. Authenticity has more power than perfection. The simple request that had started this journey had led to something extraordinary, and she realized that the true magic lay in allowing herself to act without fear or expectation. Her melody began to evolve, introducing subtle variations and delicate harmonies that added depth and richness. She noticed small reactions from the audience, the soft smile of a young woman, the gentle tightening of hands on a table, the way a couple leaned closer together, sharing the experience silently. Each gesture was a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had formed, a reminder that music has the ability to unite, even strangers, in a shared emotional experience. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for recognition, but for the opportunity to touch lives in a meaningful way. The tempo shifted slightly, guiding the listeners through moments of tension and release. The music became more expressive, yet remained grounded in subtlety and honesty. She allowed herself to explore contrasts, gentle, flowing passages followed by moments of quiet intensity, reflecting the complexity of human emotion. The audience responded intuitively, drawn into the narrative, participating in the unspoken dialogue between performer and listener. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the honesty of her expression was resonating without needing to force it.